Hey, it's Laura with TrueWell, and today I'm going to let you in on the 3 most common mistakes when it comes to starting an anti-inflammatory diet and how to avoid them. In case you don't know me, I'm Laura. I'm a nutrition specialist and certified health coach and founder of TrueWell. And I've spent pretty much the last decade figuring out how to overcome sugar addiction and find the perfect dietary style to alleviate my anxiety and depression, my crazy hormone issues, erratic blood sugar levels, calm inflammation in my body, and lose the weight after having babies, which is why I am a diehard fan and teacher of the anti-inflammatory diet. But it wasn't easy for me to get here, and countless other women make a few of the same mistakes when trying to go anti-inflammatory as well, which is what I'm about to share with you and how to avoid all that so that you can really get started. So let's get into it. So number one, blindly trusting food labels. The bottom line is that to go anti-inflammatory, you must know what's in packaged foods. When you don't know what's actually in your foods, you can't stick to an anti-inflammatory diet very well, because this dietary style doesn't really rely on counting anything. It's all about the specific foods and the quality of them. So when you have no clue how to read a food label and you don't know what any of the information means on it, it gets really tricky to pick out correct ingredients and to pick out anything from, breakfast snacks, anything like that that would qualify even though it's packaged. You're gonna have a really hard time figuring out what you don't need to have and what you do need to have. And the problem is that food companies are really, really bad about trying to trick us. So, things are getting a little bit better, but for the most part, those companies really rely on us just blindly trusting whatever they tell us on those food labels. So what we want to look at is the ingredients list, and then we also want to look at the top box that is the nutrition information. Really, for the anti-inflammatory diet, the things that you're looking for are indicators that there are no added sugars, and you want fiber to be in there. That's going to indicate that there is more like complex carbs in it versus the simple carbs, refined flours, things like that. But then just to make double sure, you still have to be able to read that ingredients label underneath. So what I always recommend is becoming very familiar with what the different names of sugars are, because as we go along, food companies know that we're getting smarter and they start using different words to sort of disguise what sugars are. So if you need to know what the different kinds are, I'll have a list or a link below this video that kind of tries to help you out with that, because there are so many of them, it's ridiculous. The other thing is, like I said, refined flours. Just because not the label, but on the front of the package, when it says like the description of whatever the food is, they'll try to give you little like descriptions that say made with whole grains or something to that effect. Just because it said it's made with whole grains does not mean that it's 100% whole grains. Now, when you're looking at an ingredients list, the first thing to know is that the very first ingredient is the thing that is the biggest quantity in that food. So they list the ingredients by biggest to smallest, and usually even when it says like whole grain bread, whole wheat bread, whatever, the first one is usually just going to say flour. It's not going to be whole grain, whole wheat, anything. It's just going to be flour. And then they add in something whole grain or whole wheat somewhere in there so that they can put that on the front. So just start to become very familiar with that. Learn how to read food labels and understand what's actually in those foods, because I promise you, those food companies do not have your best interest in mind, and they are going to do their very best. All they care about is their bottom line. They're starting to get a little bit better about understanding what consumers want and need when it comes to healthy foods like that. But for the most part, they really don't care that much. So again, it's always in your best interest to understand what you're looking at so that you can figure out what problems you're having with the things. Like, you have to be able to pinpoint what those things are to be able to take them out to effectively manage the inflammation. Now, number 2 is going to be not understanding what grains and forms of grains are okay to eat. So when it comes to carbohydrates, we do need carbohydrates to have energy, but what happens is when we have grains that are ground up and the bran part removed, what they're doing is taking out all of the fiber that's in that. Now, we need fiber because it helps our digestive systems move, but it also binds to simple carbs so that they don't make our blood sugar spike. Now, when we have spikes like that, it's going to crash. And this roller coaster that happens is really bad for inflammation. What you want is just steady blood sugar all day long. It's never going to be like a flat line, but you need a good, within a range where it's more steady versus the up and down roller coaster. So what we're looking at is whole grains, but what we need to understand too is that even if you're looking at, say, refined flour like all-purpose baking flour versus whole wheat flour, the difference between those two is that the whole wheat is going to have the fiber, but what's happened is that since it's ground up into that fine flour, it's still giving you a blood sugar spike, very similar to what the refined flour is. So if you really look at the basics of a Mediterranean diet, the true Mediterranean diet does not include flours like that. So what you are able to include are whole grains of things like rice, quinoa, couscous, things like that have the whole grain intact, so that it really slows down the digestion of those carbohydrates and the absorption of them. That way you have kind of a lengthened, version of energy coming in, for a while after you eat, versus getting that blood sugar hit and them all absorbing at the same time with the spike, because then it's going to crash later. So when we're looking at grains, again, we have the whole grains, and then also acceptable is cracked. A little bit of what we need to really understand is that when we're looking at flours, it's very difficult to kind of figure out what we should eat and not, because we do need a certain amount of carbohydrates. So one thing that I would like to point you to is another video or blog post that talks about the best way to include grains in your diet for an anti-inflammatory diet. I do personally recommend taking gluten out because it has been shown to be inflammatory, even in people that don't have celiac or don't, technically have a sensitivity, but it still can induce that inflammation. And so if you have other issues, even if you don't have like IBS or IBD, other inflammatory issues can be affected by gluten. So I always recommend taking wheat out, or barley, rye. Those are the main ones that have it. And think about replacing it with a different type of grain that's going to be really beneficial for your body to get those complex carbs while keeping your blood sugar under control. And then mistake number 3 is going to be not cooking more. When you cook more, you have better control over what you're eating. You learn to enjoy, just learning about foods and cooking, and that really ends up tying back into mistake number one. When you cook more, you don't have to rely on food labels, and the exception of that would probably be unless you use sauces, that sort of thing, within your recipes, because just for example, spaghetti sauce. That's a sauce that's already, got ingredients mixed together, but you still need to be able to read that food label to make sure that it is a spaghetti sauce that is made without sugar. So, number 1 still applies because you need to know what ingredients you're adding into your recipe as a whole. And there you have it, the 3 mistakes that most people make when starting an anti-inflammatory diet and how to fix them. And let me know, which of these mistakes are you making, or have you made, if any, and what have you done to fix it? Please give this video a thumbs up to help the algorithm to find others that have questions about the anti-inflammatory diet. Please hit the subscribe button to get updates on new videos from TrueWell, and check out the links in the description to get free resources on the anti-inflammatory diet for losing weight, managing anxiety and depression, and managing other chronic inflammatory conditions by starting an anti-inflammatory diet. Be true, be well, and I'll see you in the next video.